And Donald Trump declares Obamacare dead and urges lawmakers to help him come up with a short-term alternative. First up, just a day to go before Beijing kicks off the Communist Party's 19th National Congress, and authorities are leaving no stone unturned. Security measures have been stepped up all around the capital as thousands of party officers from across the mainland arrive for the event. Here at train stations, people have to go through tight checkups, including body searches. Meantime, officers and police dogs have been patrolling also across the city. There's a temporary ban on selling knives in supermarkets and online. You can't even send one by post to Beijing. The once every 5 years meeting is expected to usher in a new era of leaders and will be closely watched for signs of policy shifts in China.
We have to cooperate. The checkup stations will be very crowded. To avoid the delay, I'd better go out earlier.
I go to work by train every day. It's troublesome to go through frequent checkups.
Well, here in Hong Kong, the chief executive says she wants LegCo to put aside an ongoing debate on the stamp duty amendment bill so it can push ahead with talks on immigration arrangements for the cross-border rail link. Speaking just before the weekly Executive Council meeting, Carrie Lam said she wants the non-binding motion to be put to lawmakers on October the 25th. A third reading on relaxing stamp duty for home buyers had been scheduled to kick off Wednesday. The bill will now have to wait to be tabled after lawmakers conclude co-location arrangements.
After securing this support from a legislative council, we still have to go through what we call a three-step process to ensure that the arrangements we are putting in place have very strong legal backing. And that three-step process necessitates a final step of local legislation, which by itself will take time because it also has to go through legislative council. So we really cannot delay or defer this LegCo debate on the co-location arrangement.
Well, the move faced backlash from opposition lawmakers. They say Lam is backtracking on her promise to improve ties between the executive and legislature. Civic Party's Tanya Chan said there's plenty of time to debate co-location arrangements in early November and blasted the chief executive for breaking her trust with Pan Democrats just a day after hosting them for lunch. Staying on local news, a man who sparked a manhunt after wielding a knife in the High Court this morning has turned himself into the police. The man, surnamed Yu, had been involved in a police assault case and was found not guilty. He demanded compensation, but the court threw out the appeal. Unhappy with his treatment, he returned today with a knife to protest. Officers and police dogs combed the building and around Admiralty today after the incident. Yu has expressed remorse and said he acted out of impulse. To the US next, where President Donald Trump has declared Obamacare dead and urged Democrats to help him come up with a short-term replacement. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said Republicans in Congress were already meeting to draw up a health care plan that would last the next 6 months or until something permanent is put in place. But he stopped short of giving any details. Trump campaigned on ending Obamacare, also known as the Affordable Care Act, but his fellow Republicans in Congress have so far been unable to pass legislation to replace it with a more limited healthcare scheme.
They're right now having emergency meetings to get a short-term fix of healthcare, where premiums don't have to double and triple every year like they've been doing under Obamacare. Because Obamacare is finished, it's dead, it's gone. It's no longer, you shouldn't even mention, it's gone. There is no such thing as Obamacare anymore. It is and I said this years ago, it's a concept that couldn't have worked. In its best days, it couldn't have worked.
Meantime, the Trump administration's standing on the Iran nuclear deal appears to be far from clear-cut. The president now says terminating the agreement is still a possibility. Just a day earlier, senior White House officials said the US would stay in. To confuse matters, though, Trump told reporters there's a greater possibility that the US would walk away from the nuclear pact with Tehran. France and Britain say they remain committed to the 2015 deal to lift sanctions on Iran in exchange for limits on its nuclear program. Ahmed Khan Rahimi, better known as the Chelsea bomber, has been found guilty of detonating a shrapnel-packed explosive that wounded 30 people in September last year. He now faces mandatory life in prison. Colette Luke reports.
29-year-old Ahmad Khan Rahimi was found guilty Monday and faces mandatory life in prison for planting 2 bombs in Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood in September 2016, one of which exploded, wounding 30 people.
Today's verdict is a victory for New York City. It's a victory for America in its fight against terror.
What's your name?
The New Jersey man known as the Chelsea bomber is a U.S. citizen who was born in Afghanistan. He was found guilty by a federal jury in New York.
Anything with an ID?
Surveillance video showed Rahimi hours before the explosion walking with 2 suitcases and leaving 1 suitcase near a trash can. More video showing one of the bombs go off, blowing out windows and sending shrapnel into cars and people. Rahimi was arrested 2 days later in a shootout with police in Linden, New Jersey. Over the course of the 2-week trial in New York, prosecutors read from a bloody journal Rahimi was carrying, praising Osama bin Laden and writing, quote, "The sounds of the bombs will be heard in the streets." Authorities say the bomb was made by using a pressure cooker and a cell phone timer. Rahimi is scheduled to be sentenced on January 18th. He continues to face separate New Jersey charges over accusations that he planted a bomb on the route of a charity race, which exploded without any injuries.
Coming up next, the latest from the world of business with Joel Flynn.
Thanks, Britt. OK, let's kick things off by taking a look at what's been happening during the day on the Hong Kong markets. The Hang Seng Index of leading shares closed the day flat, gaining less than 5 points, but still hovering around a 10-year high at 28,697 points, rather. Investors waiting to see what happens once the National Congress kicks off from tomorrow. One trade deal that could be the deal of the year is an offer from China for part of Saudi Arabia's state oil giant Aramco. Sources say PetroChina and Sinopec recently made an offer to buy up to 5% of the company. That stake is estimated to be worth $100 billion. It comes as Aramco mulls its plan to float the business in what's likely to be the biggest IPO in history for a company valued at $2 trillion. Hong Kong is among the markets considered for a small share sale, in addition to cornerstone investments from the likes of China. One company that investors and consumers are already buying into heavily is Netflix. The streaming service added more subscribers than expected around the world in the 3rd quarter as internet television continues to explode. Another 5.3 million people signed up for Netflix over the last 3 months, beating Wall Street expectations, with profits in line with forecasts. Shares of the world's leading online video streaming service touched a record high overnight in the US. Netflix is spending heavily on original TV like House of Cards and plans to invest as much as $8 billion next year in new shows. The Kobe Steel scandal over falsified quality data looks like it could be about to get even worse. A Reuters source says Kobe understated how far back the data tampering went and that cheating could have been happening for decades. The scandal, which broke a week ago, has already sliced off about $1.6 billion off Kobe's market value. Compensation for even a small number of the 500-odd companies potentially affected could prove costly for Japan's #3 steelmaker. Meanwhile, on the economic front, Japan looks like it's continuing its recent strong performance. Confidence among Japanese manufacturers was up in October to hit a peak not seen since the beginning of the financial crisis in mid-2007. A weak yen and strong demand abroad for Japanese exports has helped drive the economy. It is an encouraging sign for Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who is in the middle of fighting an election. Bilateral economic talks with the US, though, have proven thorny, with Japan skirting American demands to negotiate a trade deal between the two. Joel Abbey has more for us from Tokyo.
It's back to the drawing board on the issue of trade between the US and Japan, with both sides holding high-level talks in Washington, although Tokyo still isn't sold. The Trump administration has been openly fixated on shrinking its trade deficits under its America First policy. It wants more access to Japan's highly protected agricultural market. But Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is trying to win over farmers and dairy producers ahead of Sunday's election, so you can understand why there is a lot of resistance here. There's two sides sides, though, did manage to agree on something, lifting trade restrictions on US potatoes and Japanese persimmons, as well as streaming noise and emissions testing for US auto exports. And, of course, on North Korea, the countries agreed to continue working together against the rising threat from Pyongyang.
Well, speaking of North Korea, horse racing isn't perhaps the first thing that springs to mind when you talk about it, but the country's punters, who once risked 3 years hard labour for gambling, are now able to bet on local races as the isolated kingdom scrambles to find new sources of income. Laura Frickberg takes a look.
The odds are you wouldn't usually link sanction-hit North Korea with horse racing, but the isolated island is bucking the trend. Pyongyang now allowing people as young as 12 to place bets.
The number of rich people in North Korea has increased, and the gap between rich and poor has been widening. They may have reached the level where the country can run a gambling business because of local demand.
State TV says a series of horse races took place at the Mirim Riding Club on Sunday, one of leader Kim Jong-un's flagship developments. It, along with ski resorts and theme parks, are being built, according to the state, to improve North Koreans' lives. Analysts, though, bet that's not the real reason.
The purpose of these projects is to earn foreign currency and draw capital from the wealthy locals for the state's economy, rather than to prop up the people's well-being.
All signs point towards that being the case. North Korea's access to foreign currency has been squeezed by recent sanctions imposed by the international community. Even North Korea's main trading partner, China, is toughening its stance as Pyongyang shows no sign of ending its race towards powerful nuclear weapons.
An easy race to bet on, I would have thought. You just gamble on whichever horse is owned by Kim Jong-un.
That's true. And I was wondering if it was like Happy Valley on a Wednesday night. Probably not. Thanks, Joel. All right, time for a break. But when we return, we'll be telling you what's behind these amazing whale acrobatics.